Good evening, members, and welcome to the global launch, I suppose, of the Lakes Chocolatier, your last whiskey of the month. It's Craig here, your head of whiskey creation in Scotland, and I am delighted to be joined by Brendan McCarron, the head whiskey maker at the Lakes. How's it going, Brendan?
Yeah, going well, Craig. Nice to see you. Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too. You too. We're going to jump into a bit of a chat about your journey, about English whiskey, about the Lakes. But before we do that, I want to remind all the members tuned in that there are prizes this evening for the best questions, so get them into the comments wherever you are. Basically, if you're in Australia, you'll get your next whiskey of the month on us, and if you're in New Zealand, you'll get one of these, our crystal cut Glencairn founders glasses for asking the best questions. So yeah, let's get the chat going for Brendan. So Brendan, the Chocolatier, it's been one of those releases that it came out, members just went absolutely mad for it. Can you give us a wee bit of an insight into I guess into how you make a whiskey chocolatey? It's probably a good place to start.
Yeah, actually. So it really was, it's probably worth clarifying that, I'm just taking the credit today. All the skill and talent that was put into this whiskey were by Grace Frith, our assistant whiskey maker, and by a good friend of mine's, Sarah Burgess, who was the head whiskey maker before me at the Lakes. But I'm sure they would agree with me when you're trying to make a chocolatey whiskey. Chocolate's in a lot of whiskies. You will find that kind of milky chocolate note. Sometimes you get a bit of dark chocolate. Even occasionally you get that lovely sort of icing sugar white chocolate note that just comes out of casks. So sometimes it comes by a bit of good fortune and a bit of that beautiful randomness that is maturation. But if you're really going to set out to make something that you're going to call the Chocolatier, you better make it slap with chocolate. You better really make it be front center, the first thing you think about, the thing that starts to develop in the middle, and the last final parts of the finish better say chocolate in a big way. And really the way you do that is sherry. You look at your sherry casks, and you look at the ones that have really sort of went more. They're always going to be balanced between the spirit character of the Lakes, and you're always going to get some of the sherriness from the cask. But you're probably looking for the ones that just slightly are bigger on the wood impact in the final spirit. And that's what the Chocolatier is. There's lots and lots of spirit that was matured in Oloroso casks, European oak and American oak, and we can go into the impact of both of them. And also I can even be controversial and say we shouldn't really be calling it European oak, but we can go there in a little bit. But when you get them, they're going to give you that milk chocolate. Pedro Jimenez, of course, helps to bring more of like a kind of dark chocolate note. But also there is some bourbon cast in there as well, because you don't want it just to dominate. You don't want just to taste sherry. We still want it to be a complex, balanced, integrated, beautiful whiskey. So there's a little bit of bourbon in there. It's almost like the salt that you pour on top of that you drop on top of chocolate sometimes just to make it pop. But yeah, basically what you're doing is you're really looking for your casks in the warehouse that have kind of went just not too far, but they've went more onto the sherry side of things, and that's where you get that kind of unctuousness. You get those kind of fruit and nut chocolate kind of combos. And really that would be my strong advice to you if you're setting out to make your own super chocolatey single malt chocolate flavored whiskey.
Excellent. So there's probably a couple of things that people have noticed tuned in. Number one is you don't have an English accent.
Yep.
And number two, you clearly know your stuff when it comes to putting whiskey together. Let's explore your career a wee bit. How did you end up at the Lakes? Give us a whistle stop tour of your journey through whiskey, because I know there's loads of folk in Australia and New Zealand that want to get into this industry, and they love hearing how you get the best job in the world.
Sure, and I agree. It really is the best job in the world. So I'll do the sort of brief version, so 2 hours maximum, and then we'll be through it. But this is actually 20 years since I joined the whiskey industry. So all the way back, I did chemical engineering at university. So I was quite good at chemistry, and chemical engineering was good for getting jobs once you left university. So that was my main mission when I went to uni. If anything, I wanted to be a historian, but I very quickly realised that that's pretty niche. So I pivoted to science quite quickly. Briefly worked in pharmaceuticals down in England. That was my first foray into England from Scotland. But then moved back up into Scotland and joined Diageo's graduate scheme 20 years ago this year. And my first placement, kind of do 3 or 4 or 5 placements in this 3-year program. And they asked me, where do you want to go? And I genuinely said, I'll go wherever the best job is, the best opportunity. And they were saying single malt is really starting to take off. You know, it's crazy to think about that today, but 20 years ago, it was a different kettle of fish. They were seeing real recovery and real growth and real excitement in single malt. So I got moved into the single malt whiskey field, and I started a maltster. So I used to make malted barley at Birkhead Maltings. So bringing in raw barley, soaking it, germinating it, kilning it, and turning it into malted barley. From there, I then also got a second job because Diageo decided to build a brand new whiskey distillery. So it was the first whiskey distillery in 40 years, which ended up being Rose Isle. So I worked on the design of that distillery. And at that point, I did my whiskey exams, the brewing and distilling diploma. And that was kind of like where, you know, I got the bug, and that I kind of not completely, but sort of realized this is probably what I want to do in one way, shape or form. So then from there, I moved down to Leven in Fife, where we would blend together the classic malts. So I wasn't a blender then. I physically ran the department that emptied the casks in a process called disgorging, which you know, I think needs a bit of PR and marketing to kind of rebrand that, because it's like not the most salubrious name I've ever heard in my life. I did a brief foray off to America, which was brilliant. Nothing to do with whiskey. I just kind of wanted to live away somewhere and do something cool. Then I came back, became the distillery manager of Oban. So that was, I think it was around about 14 years ago. So the Oban 14 that you're drinking right now was distilled by me and the team way back when.
Do you want to apologise for that or take the credit?
I take credit for that, definitely. It's a brilliant whiskey. And then after a couple of years at Oban, I moved to Islay, one of the kind of spiritual homes of whiskey, and definitely one of my favourite places on earth. So I spent 3 years on Islay running Diageo's operations there, Lagavulin, Kalila, Port Ellen, and some other stuff. And then that was like when I kind of made a big change. So that was almost 10 years, and I guess you could say I was a master distiller by that stage. And then I moved to Moët Hennessy. I was approached to take on a role as Dr. Bill Lumsden's sort of right-hand person and successor. So I spent 8 years learning I went all the way back to the beginnings. That was learning casks, sensory. Turned out I was quite good at sensory from the testing they put me through. Learning how to start putting whiskies together. I actually did no distilling, which was kind of weird because I was kind of probably one of the most experienced distillers in the company, but they wanted me to very much do a different role. And so after 8 years, I became sort of like a master blender, if you like. But the whole plan was to take over Bill when he retired. And I very much realised that Bill will never retire. I'm still confident I'll retire before Bill retires. I'm fairly confident in that to this day. So then I went to Distill, which is now called CVH, where I was basically responsible for everything, you know, from raw materials and distilling, maturation, whiskey making, ambassadorial. So that was like a huge role and a very exciting one, making Tobermory, Leitchik, Bunnahabhain, Deanston and Black Bottle and many other things. And it was awesome. But it got to that stage where that was me coming close to 20 years in the business, where I realized that I maybe had developed quite a niche range of skills. It's unusual to be both a master distiller and a master blender. And I was kind of helping people for, you know, free. I'd often get a phone call from people saying, could you, you know, help us work out this issue or do this or do that? And basically just too many exciting opportunities came across my table. So I was approached by a distillery in Japan, a distillery in China. I was approached by someone building a brand new distillery in Scotland. And I made a kind of scary but exciting decision to leave the industry, if you like leave, so that I didn't just get completely boxed into one kind of role. And I set up my own business. So now I'm a whiskey consultant. I kind of work for a few places around the world. and one of the most exciting ones, and one of my key ones, and something that excites me a lot is working at the Lakes Distillery, because it's in England, but it's actually the closest client to my house. A fantastic team. I am a whiskey drinker first, so I've been a long time admirer of the whiskies. I know Deval and I know Sarah personally, so it just made sense. And here I am. Or not. You probably picked up I'm in a hotel room due to some scheduling issues, but that's part of the life of a traveling whiskey maker.
So it sounds, I mean, that's it's an incredible 20-year career. It sounds like the Lakes have made a fairly impressive signing, if you were to put it in those sort of terms. You know, they've basically they've managed to get a Messi to join their team. Now you mentioned earlier, you know, Grace is in your team as assistant whiskey maker as well. Grace lives and breathes Lakes. So when you bring all of your kind of experience of the industry globally, and then you've got obviously Grace's incredible experience of the Lakes, like how does that work, and how are you basically leveraging both of your experiences to create such incredible whiskey?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, you know, and I'm also wondering if it's Messi with an I or a Y, because both are fairly accurate if you ask my wife. I think that's one of the. It wasn't one of the reasons I joined the Lakes, but honestly, in the first couple of visits to the Lakes, it's one of the things that I've really loved about this role, is the fact that we have incredibly talented blender in Grace. So Grace Firth is just super talented. You know, she really does live and breathe the distillery, the liquid. She knows everything. So it's actually just great fun to work with her. But I think it's very much, you know, I am really committed to the long-term future of the Lakes, but also I am a consultant, and I'm very much there to help. It's not to take over, and it's not to, you know, sort of wipe what happened in the past and we're going to just do it my way. But it's to offer some experience, offer some advice. You know, sometimes I see something being done, I can offer up that absolutely we can do it this way, but here's how we did it at some other places, and maybe there's trials that we can try. And I think the team are super open to that. You know, the distilling side of the business is ran by a guy called Bruce Smith. I'd met Bruce once or twice. Whiskey industry is quite small, you know, and we kind of everyone kind of cross paths. And I've found the team dynamic to be, like, you know, just fantastic, and it's a really important thing for me. Sounds quite cheesy, you know, like you get to make whiskey, and of course, obviously that's the glamorous part, and it's the part that everyone here's here to talk about. But I genuinely like working with talented people, but I like working with nice people as well, and it really is like a fantastic team.
Yeah, it's an incredible place. I was obviously lucky enough to come down and meet you there at the start of the year. For those tuned in, we snuck a couple of samples to some of the locals, because they don't have the opportunity to buy this whiskey. This whiskey is essentially Australia and New Zealand first, not exclusive, but first. And there's not going to be many bottles floating about in the Lakes. But even just to meet some of the locals and the folk in the distillery was fantastic. It's one of the most beautiful places on earth.
Oh yeah,
the Lake District. It's stunning. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the stuff that's getting put out, it's incredible. I think it's top of the game. Now Tim has a cracking question here, and this I suppose goes to potentially what's coming from you and the team in the future. He's asking you, Brendan, have you ever tasted a whiskey and thought, wow, I want to try and recreate this? Or is there anything that you've ever tasted that has been, that you think in the back of your head, I really want to turn this into a Lakes release?
Yeah, actually, and it is a really good question, and it is quite a common thing. So, God, how to answer this without going down an enormous rabbit hole? I guess so. What happens quite often is you'll get a range of casks. So I might leave, you know, some notes for Grace, saying, look, you know, it'd be great to pull. Let's get all of the 2010 Oloroso sherries that were filled in this warehouse. Let's just grab them out and, you know, let's just sample them and see what we've got. And you'll taste them, and they'll be, you know, commonality. There'll be themes that you're expecting. You know, the Lakes makes like a fruity and complex spirit. So you'd expect to find some oranges, some lemons, and some other things. And then, of course, the Oloroso is going to give you classically the dried fruits, a bit of nuttiness, chocolate, because we're here to talk about chocolate. Give you lots of that, and I'll give you some of these really nice spices as well. But just every so often, you'll find one that just jumps in a way that is, it's not unexpected, but it's more like the flavors are kind of out of balance. So it might be way spicier than you expected, or it might just have like a mellowness that was, you know, like brilliant, subtle mellowness. It might just be super integrated, or actually it might just be a real individual, and it's just went, I am literally just going to taste of raisins and nothing else. And it's when you get those ones, sometimes that does take you on a journey to go, right, why did this go off on a separate way? And because maturation, you know, and whiskey making in general, there's so many variables, it's sadly impossible. And I know all of us as whiskey drinkers, we try to jump to conclusions. If you do this, it causes that. It's unfortunately not a definitive kind of process, you know. So there is times where you just get to taste something and you're just like, that is so spectacular. I want to make it. I want to make more casks come out with that so that we can make a batch and really celebrate this. And sometimes it succeeds. Sometimes you manage to do that. Other times it doesn't. And it's just, that's part of the joy, the love, and the frustration of being a whiskey maker.
Yeah. Matthew Cohen's got a cracking follow-up question to that. You mentioned there about casks sort of going off and doing their own thing. We are quite lucky. Like, we see a lot of single casks here at the club that do that. There's a 7-year-old Glen Scotia that we're about to release that I honestly can't believe that whiskey exists, because it is just so kind of out there compared to what I expect from that distillery. But one of the things I loved talking to yourself and Grace about at the Lakes is this idea of élevage, of shifting whiskey from cask to cask to cask based on, it's almost a punt, right? Because you said there it can go off in different ways. But Matthew's asking, you know, do you have sort of set timeframes, or, you know, how often are you checking those casks after you've shifted them and then deciding, well, that's exactly what I wanted, or that's going off in a different direction? Like, what's the frequency there?
Yeah. So the first thing I'd say, and this is part of, you know, the excitement of joining the Lakes for me, was élevage and this concept, and, you know, getting to go. Obviously, I understand a fair amount of élevage from, you know, working for Moët Hennessy. They have, you know, like quite a lot of very experienced cognac makers and wine makers where élevage basically began or inspired the Lakes. But I really wanted to get behind the scenes and see what was happening. In fact, when you were down, Craig, we showed you, like, it is an enormous amount of sampling, you know, way more sampling of your total stock than I'm normally used to. And I think it really is, like, speaking generically in the Scotch whisky industry, which of course I love, and, you know, very passionate Scots whisky maker, but probably in Scotch things move quite slowly, and we kind of rely on the first 5 or 10 years to go to here. And when it's here, then we're trying to get here, and we get to about here, and we might be up or down, but then it's at this point we then start to make the changes or the finishes or the adjustments, and then we get to where we want it to be. And it's worked for hundreds of years, and it will continue to work, and that's fantastic. But the Lakes, what we're trying to do is, rather than course correct all of our casks here and get them to there, it's almost like making every cask end up exactly where we wanted it to be, by making small course corrections often. So we're sampling every cask. Of course, we nose and check every batch of spirit that we create. Of course, we nose and check every empty cask that arrives to our site to make sure the quality is great. We spend like fortunes, which is always great. It's always great to join a company that has a very healthy cask budget. So we buy the best, which of course helps. But the first big sampling, and I'm not saying these as exacts, but roughly the first big sampling is we sample everything at 9 months. Right. And at 9 months, we're saying, right, where are the ones? Are they where we expect them to be? And mostly they are. But but also it's like, are they more sort of fruity? Are they more light? Are they more spirit led? Or are they more tasting of the elements of the cask? And then that's one decision where we can make a split. And then depending on how close or how far away they are from where we expect, we can make the decision to leave them where they are. or we can actually make a decision to then, that's the first stage where you might see liquid leaving one cask and going into a different type of cask, either to intensify what's already there, or possibly because it's too intense already, too intense after 9 months, but maybe to sort of, we like the speed it's going at, let's try and kind of slow it down and let it just develop in a slower way. So there's certain times we're looking to concentrate, and there's other times we're looking to dilute the effect of the maturation. So then after that, another huge sweep. So everything in the warehouse, everything in our stock will happen at about 3 years.
Wow.
So we have, every time I go down to the lakes, I'm not on site permanently, but I'm going down often, and every time I arrive, there'll be the entire table will be full of 9 months that we'll check and make decisions on, and then we clean that all down, and then we set up the 3 years, and it's another huge array of samples which we work through in sections, because you can't just blast through them all, because your nose just can't do that. So élevage is precise, strenuous, I'm not going to lie. It involves a huge amount of commitment, but it's also, it just brings in a different level of manipulation and skill into whiskey making. And it's great for me because, I love to learn, and it is a new learning for me, and something that I don't think I would have came up with myself based on the experience I had in the past, but it's definitely something I'm now incorporating into, into my theories and methodologies of whiskey making.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, like, as I say, the folk that have got this bottle, like, you don't realize how much. The way I like to explain it is that this is whiskey making in the margins, right? If you're running a big distillery, so say you run a distillery that makes 2 million liters a year, you've got 10-year-old out there, that's 20 million liters. Theoretically, you can play with. There is an ability to create things because of the volume of stock, and you just have to go and find what you want. You guys don't have that luxury, but the beauty of it is it gives you the ability to, as you say, build whiskey from the ground up, to focus in on a particular flavour spectrum, I suppose, and dial the whiskey towards that throughout its life. And you're right, it's not something that happens a lot in the industry. I know from my time at Edrington, at Highland Park, Macallan, famous grouse, we went through every single cask. Everyone was nosed before it ended up anywhere. Now, for a company that size, that was a huge undertaking. But even then, the flexibility to sort of then make a tweak and change a product in 6 months wasn't really there.
Yeah.
So you guys have that, but you have it to the nth degree. And then, as we mentioned earlier, the whiskey making experience that has taken up residence at the Lakes is giving you knowledge well beyond your years for a brand. And stuff like this that's the release, like that is the result, right?
Yeah.
The number of comments that we've got here about how chocolatey it is, the number of people are saying that they love the fact that they doubled up because they get a second bottle of this. I'm not saying they took a punt. A lot of our members have had the Lakes before, but they're very, very happy with the fact that they've got a couple of these bottles, which is absolutely fantastic. There's someone mentioned about hot chocolate and how it's a great pairing, a spicy hot chocolate in this whiskey. It's and a great band as well. You've nailed the brief, right? It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, it's something that I've inherited, so I will absolutely take all the credit, even though I didn't necessarily make it. It was Grace that deserves the super kudos here, but it is fantastic. There is some whiskies that have come out recently which you get really excited about, and they taste fantastic, but do they really hit the brief? Not sure. And I think it's important, if you're going to call a whiskey the Chocolatier, it really has to have layers and elements and textures as well, which is one of the things I loved about it. It does have the texture of a couple of little squares of chocolate melting on your tongue. It has that kind of ganache, that sort of cakey chocolate feeling to it as well. So it's great when a whiskey really hits the brief. I think it's, you can have a great brief and you can have a great whiskey, but the two of them also must kind of match together if you're going to make like a really fantastic whiskey. So it's great hearing that people are enjoying it. It's great that the Whisky Club have partnered with us on this, but it's just brilliant to hear the feedback's been so positive. I know people aren't necessarily going to just reach out to you out the blue with anything negative, but genuinely, everyone I've talked to, anyone I've given a sample of this to, anyone that I've tasted through with it, they've loved it. It really is like a kind of, absolutely hits the nail on the head whiskey release. So.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, we probably should talk about the whiskey. I can see from the comments that not everyone waited, which is great. We don't expect people to wait for me to start talking about whiskey, because there have been some of these where I completely forgot to talk about the whiskey altogether because we got stuck in the geeky stuff. But I've got one here. Very, very lucky to have one of the few bottles in the UK. And I mean, for me, it's that milk chocolate thing on the nose, and there's this. I think the thing I love about it, as you say, you can find dark chocolate aroma whiskey anywhere, right? And you could have decided to put that in a box, put that in a bottle, release it, and say this is a chocolatier, but you haven't done that. It feels like, the team have gone away and found everything that makes up the chocolate eating experience, right? So there's vanilla in there. I'm assuming that's from your American oak. There's those kind of gingery notes. There's raisins. There's dark chocolate, there's milk chocolate, there's basically layers upon layers upon layers, as you say, that ganache kind of aroma and flavour. Yeah. In terms of like cask makeup and stuff like that, do you want to just go through the major cask types and say what they bring to the chocolate story? Yeah,
sure. So the two major elements, so basically the mission was go into the warehouse and let's find things that have all, just like you perfectly described, Craig, what all these elements of chocolate. So it's not just find the ones that taste of milk chocolate. So let's find ones that have a very predominant chocolate note, find ones that are darker, ones that are lighter. Let's find some vanilla. Let's find some stuff, because chocolate does have a fruitiness to it as well. So let's find some whiskies that have a bit of fruitiness there, and then let's start bringing them together. So the biggest two elements were both sherry casks, basically Oloroso sherry casks, but let's say just sherry. The American oak sherry casks are the biggest parcel in this whiskey. An American oak sherry is the most common sherry. I know there's a myth out there, or a slight confusion that it's actually casks made in Europe, but since the beginning of time, since the 15th century, American oak has been coming to Jerez in Spain. So American oak casks with sherry in them are going to give that. American oak's full of lignans, gives like vanilla, coconut, gives like a creaminess, and gives sweetness. Now, all oats give sweetness, but it gives more of like a white sugar sweetness. So that lighter, brighter sweetness. And then the next parcel of casks that take the second biggest role in making the chocolatier is sherry casks. Again, pretty much mostly Oloroso in French oak. So everyone says European oak, but it's French oak. So it's oak from France. Tiny bits of Spanish oak, possibly in the slivers, but it's French oak. That stuff's going to be far less vanilla and cream and white sugar, because there's not really any lignin in French oak. It's full of tannin. So the tannin is going to give you spiciness. So you've got to be careful. And even though I wasn't there, I've since spoke to Grace. There was some European oak casks that on their own absolutely met the brief of this is a big chocolatey cask, but they had this too much spicy, too much dryness, too much white pepper in them, so they didn't make the grade. But using French oak with skill really adds structure, it adds texture, and it almost elevates other flavors in a whiskey without necessarily tasting them yourselves. So those are the two big ones. So there is some American oak bourbon cask in there, and that's just so that it doesn't just taste like, let's say, like singularly of milk chocolate, and I know it's bizarre, but if it just tasted of one element of chocolate, it actually be less of this kind of chocolate dessert in a glass, So the American oak is there almost like binding together the two elements of the sherry casks and just sort of conducting everything, even though it's only a very, very small element. So once that was put together, just almost like, you make something beautiful in chocolate and then you cover it in another layer of chocolate and let it all seal. You make a chocolate cake and then chocolate icing around it, just to make sure it really was this kind of absolute lesson in decadence. We then took that batch that was put together and it was fully finished in some more Oloroso sherry casks for a short period of time, but it just elevated everything and made it absolutely the whiskey that we could with pride and with authenticity put the chocolatier onto the onto the bottle.
Yeah, the other thing I love about it, and this is again, it's something that we often forget. We talk all about the casks, and the casks are telling the story, but they're telling the story on top of the spirit. So after I've taken a sip of that, and it's basically disappeared, and it kind of mouth dries out a little bit, what you're left with is the Lakes spirit character. It's that lovely fruitiness at the end of it, and I think that having that journey from the chocolatier basically back into the kind of Lakes fruitiness is something that's absolutely it's essential. Otherwise, this could have been any whiskey, right?
It's really important. Like Bill Lumsden, who I worked for a long time, taught me, the best whiskies. You can have a dominant character, absolutely, and you can have like the dominant character has 20 things behind it, or the dominant character can have 3 things behind it, but it must have more than one thing. Whiskey can't be one-dimensional. It must be integrated and balanced. So absolutely, we could have just picked, the oldest, most sherried casks and put them together, and it would probably hold up to the colour, example that we need for chocolatier. It may well hold up to the initial sip as well, but I think you would just be left a little bit, wanting. You'd be like, where's the second act? Where's the third act? Like, how does this develop? So I think it's essential, you said, and it's just beyond important that you have that balance, integration, and complexity, which used to be a great word to describe whiskey, but then everyone say that about everything. So it's just been so used that it's almost valueless.
It's either complex or it's smooth, right? It's
because there's, like Paddy said, we're loving the complexity, and yes, this is a complex whiskey, but it's just honestly anything that people drink now, you can give them a glass of water and they go, complex, and you're like, no.
I love it. Ian Peter Allinson, he's put his tasting notes up here. You see them on the screen. So spice, dry fruits, milk chocolate, and then that sherry influence. Chocolate covered cherries is a great shout as well. Yeah, it is. He's right. It's absolutely delicious. And again, we probably don't we don't appreciate this so much in Scotland because of maybe the volume of different single malts out there. But I know that our members in New Zealand and Australia do. It's like, this is obviously, it's a non-age statement whiskey, which gives you freedom to find those casks and find that balance between cask types, between cask and spirit and all that kind of stuff. And anyone that's had a New Zealand or an Australian whiskey knows that, you don't need decades in a cask. Using young whiskey and old whiskey together is a great way to create complexity, but to create those different flavor profiles and mouthfeels. So I think we've definitely found the right audience for this. The other thing, and I know you can't take any credit for this either, but folk are mentioning the packaging. Like, you must sort of see this stuff on the shelf and just think, oh, we've got a winner here, right?
I mean, you say I can't take credit, I will. It's just deserved, but I'll absolutely hoover up anything that's going. No, that's it. Yeah, I'm definitely a liquid person, so I'm your person for malting, distilling, maturing, and whiskey making. I can admire the very cool shape and like the awesome color. It does grab attention, and I love the name. I love the name Chocolatier. But yeah, I'm very much on the liquid making side, and forever will be. Lots of talented people out there that do that stuff, but I know nothing about it.
Good stuff. Now we'll start to wrap it up with a couple of I think fairly easy questions, but I think the answers will be the most insightful. So you've just created the Chocolatier, the whiskey that is the epitome of chocolate flavored whiskey. Ultimately, what are the next exciting projects from a flavor perspective you're looking into? And then a follow-up question, which is from me personally. When you come across some of those kind of weird and wonderful single casks, how do I get some so that I can have a look at them for the club?
So I think the future of the Lakes, I get to influence it, but there is an awful lot of what you say. It sounds a bit cheesy, but the distillery itself will kind of tell us what it is going to do and what it is going to like and not like when we play with it. But I think there is a really quite progressive, quite modern approach to whiskey making at the Lakes, which I'm loving, which is some places, and it's not a criticism, but some places say we are never changing anything to do with distillation. It's, you know, it was written in concrete in 1830 and nothing will ever change. And you've got to think, well, you know, what worked then? Some things are changing, your raw materials are changing, your environment, the temperatures are changing, wood's changing. So I don't think I'm not saying you change every week, but you should be adjusting and experimenting and trialing to really maximize your spirit character. And that's what we're doing right now. So we're doing lots of trials to, it's not sweeping changes, but just try to refine. I'd like to push the fruitiness up a little bit and kind of almost like spread out the fruitiness a little bit more, you know, make it a little bit more distinctive, make the stone fruits and the citrus fruits separate and a little higher. So the team and I are working on that right now. So lots of trials, some will succeed, some will fail. But just, like I say, a little nudge and just a little refinement to something. Just this is part of élevage, basically, just constantly trying to, you'll never be perfect, but you can always try to get closer to perfection with everything you do. So that's a big part of the job, and it's something that I really love. And then the other part is, I don't think it's boring of me to say that what really works at the Lakes is really high quality sherry casks. So I think that's going to be one of the key focuses, you know. So Oloroso, we know it works fantastically. How do we maximize the Oloroso cask interaction with the Lake spirit? But also sherry's, like, we've barely scratched the surface with sherry in whiskey, you know. Like just 10 years ago, PX, Pedro Jimenez, was not that commonly known. But now it's Oloroso and PX, and that's fantastic because it makes great stuff. But there's so much more that we can go after. There's oak species, there's size of casks, there's various styles of sherries out there, you know, from the light to the dark. I think that's going to be something that, well, that's something that I really want to explore at the Lakes, because spirit loves sherry and sherry loves the spirit. And people, all the people out here in the club and people further afield, they love the kind of style that the Lakes has become associated with. So I think I'm not here to do a mass change, but it's to really focus in on what works brilliantly and really develop that. And also it's to really, you know, the Lakes have excitingly launched 2 sort of permanent editions, which has not been part of its history. So Signature and Boundless. So the other really exciting part is getting that out there to the world, because they're fantastic. But then it's working out how to make the second batch and the third batch and continue to make sure that it's, you know, the same whiskey, but also that constant pursuit of perfection as well. So a lot, I think you could say.
That's exciting. It's always good seeing more lakes on the shelves over here. It's and around the world as well. I've seen a wee cheeky comment there from Ian Peter Allenson, asking about, have we got another whiskey coming for the club? Obviously, that's for us to work on together. There's nothing we can reveal today. But you know, from my perspective, this was one of those that when I joined the club and this popped up, and was one of the first projects I kind of got a sample of. It was so impressive. So I know that for everyone that works at the club and all of our members, we cannot wait to see what's coming next from you guys. Now, I'm just going to round off with, we did have a winner. Let me just pull that up. The winner tonight, Matthew Cohen. You are going to get next month's Whiskey of the Month on us. And Merlin Telford in New Zealand, there's a crystal glass heading your way as well for your comments this evening. So thanks for joining in on the chat. Brendan, it has been an absolute pleasure. I hope you get home for the weekend, because I know my football team's playing your football team and we're supposed to go to the game together. So if you could get on a plane so we can have a beer before, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll see you there. Maybe bring a single cask or 2 as well.
Oh, sounds good. Sounds good. But on behalf of myself, everyone at the club, thank you, Brendan, and to all the members tuned in. Again, we can't do these without you. Thanks for tuning in. Any feedback you have, anything you want to see from the Lakes, drop those comments into Facebook, or give us a shout. Our member experience team will make sure that we get those comments to Brendan, Grace, and the team. But thank you very much, Brendan. Jump on a plane, get back to Scotland. Thanks everyone else. We will see you all next time. Cheers.
Thank you.